Dustin Poirier just posted that his fight with Benoit Saint Denis is off. But he's still training, right? He's saying that he's still working. Then I look at Benoit Saint Denis' Instagram. About 20 minutes ago, he said he's counting the days to his fight on UFC 299. And 3 hours ago, he was in training camp. What is going on here? Both guys seem to be healthy. Both guys were supposed to fight at UFC 299. And it was announced not that long ago that their fight was going to be a 5-round co-main event. What is happening here? Could it be visa issues from Benoit Saint Denis? I don't think it could be an injury because Benoit did post after Dustin did that he's still fighting on UFC 299, and Dustin said he's still working. Could it be that they pulled Dustin off of that fight to put him on UFC 300 in order to fight someone like Conor McGregor? That's what I'm thinking. I think perhaps if this is happening, right, if this fight is off, that Dustin might be fighting Conor McGregor. They may have came to him with the offer, get out of this fight, we'll have something in place for BSD, and you can have a bigger fight at UFC 300, a potential rematch with Conor McGregor, or Nate Diaz comes back, you could fight him there. That was supposed to be scheduled in the past. It's a lot better and less of a risk than taking up a much lower ranked opponent like BSD. That was a big step down in the rankings that he was taking against that rising contender, and perhaps he came to his senses and was kind of like, okay, there's no reason for me to fight this guy. They came to me with this better offer. I'm going to fight Conor, I'm going to fight Nate Diaz, I'm going to fight one of these bigger guys because that's ultimately what I wanted this whole time. I wanted the big money fight. I wanted something that got me excited. Conor will get me excited again, Nate Diaz will get me excited. And if that's the case, if he is headlining UFC 300, he would be headlining over Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan, and Max Holloway, right? Many of these other lightweights that are gunning for their shot at the lightweight title. Wait, hold up, breaking update. Dustin has expanded on what this means. So according to Brett Okamoto, there was no contractual agreement between Dustin and Benoit Saint Denis to fight. So this is what Brett Okamoto says. Dustin Poirier expands on his recent fights off tweet to me via text. There was no contractual agreement before the fight was announced and we couldn't come to terms, end quote. This whole time they weren't even signed to fight each other. So what was all this news about them being 5 rounds and this is gonna be some mega fight, like this is gonna be a very what was all this about? Wait, how many fights are like this? How many fights is this happening with right now? All those like 300 fights, 299 fights. So they never signed, they never came to an agreement with Dustin Poirier. So that must mean that he's fighting Conor or Nate. Because if he didn't come to terms to fight Benoit Saint Denis, that means there had to have been something bigger for Dustin. He sees something bigger than BSD right now, and he's not telling us yet. There's no evidence in that, of course. Maybe Dustin isn't fighting anybody. I'm thinking maybe they offered him something better. Maybe. Which would be pretty interesting. And we have to also mention that if Dustin is not on 299, the pay-per-view of that card is going to be much lower. Because Dustin is arguably the biggest star of that card. He's the most familiar name, he's the one that the fans like the most. And even with how stacked that card is, without Dustin on it, it's still not going to sell as much if Dustin was, right? Dustin and I would think Sean O'Malley are the main driving forces of that 299 card. And with one of those guys out, especially the bigger star of the two, I'm expected to draw anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000 buys, which is still a really good number. But I'm very curious on the news that's going to come up about who Dustin is fighting next. And can you just imagine they create that 165-pound weight class just for this, right? Just for Conor's return, him versus Dustin Poirier for the inaugural 165-pound title, potentially making Conor a 3-division champion, and have it kind of like somewhat of an excuse to put that fight as a main event over other title fights on the card. But then again, they have Justin versus Max as a co-main event over Zhang Li versus Yang Xiaonan, portraying Gaethje as a real champion with that BMF title. But if this is the case, what do you do with BSD? What do you do with Benoit Saint Denis? I think maybe give him someone like Beneil Dariush. They could give him Mateusz Gamrot, Jalen Turner. There's many fights for Benoit Saint Denis for the fact that the guy is much lower in the rankings. He's got a plethora of options of who to fight next, and I think those fights would be pretty interesting. I think Beneil Dariush would be kind of like a stepping stone for Benoit Saint Denis, and it seems like at this state of Dariush's career, that's essentially what they're going to be using him for. They might just be using that guy to inflate some of the rising contenders, giving them a path toward the top of that division, right? They just did it with Arman Tsarukyan. They might be able to do the same thing with Benoit Saint Denis before they knock down Beneil Dariush too low in the rankings, because I think BSD would beat Dariush. I think he's way too physical, he's way too big, and he has an insane chin. The guy's an absolute tank of a lightweight. But if that's not the fight, then maybe it's Mateusz Gamrot, right? Mateusz Gamrot is a very good fight. I think he'll be quite competitive, especially if he goes to the ground. And he might be fast and slick enough on the feet to touch Benoit here and there and get away from those big power strikes. Jalen Turner would also be a very competitive and explosive fight. That would be the funnest one of all of these. I just don't think Jalen Turner has the chin to take the shots from Benoit Saint Denis, and Benoit has the chin to take the shots from Jalen Turner. That would be the ultimate difference maker of that fight. So there's a lot of options for Benoit Saint Denis to keep him on that UFC 299 card.